Hello, everybody. Just bear with us while we get technically set up. You're very welcome to the webinar this afternoon. Great. Okay. We are live. So I am Dr. Liz Corcoran. I'm the chair of the Down Syndrome Research Foundation. And I am joined today by two amazing researchers, Professor Lee Chan, who is from Queen Mary's, and is a specialist researcher in pediatric endocrinology. So it's a very specialist area, who is joined also by Professor Andre Strydom from King's College London, who's a specialist psychiatrist in intellectual disabilities. So they're both together talking to us about a special research team called the GO-DS21 team. So they're going to be telling us a little bit about what are they going to be looking at with this research team, what's the bigger picture, and how you guys can get involved and learn more about their work and support research and what they're trying to discover to help people with Down syndrome. So first of all, I'm going to welcome Dr. Chan. Hi, Dr. Chan, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for inviting us to this. It's my first Facebook Live sort of experience, so I'm learning as I'm going along.
Don't worry. Yes, we're all kind of learning as we go along with this technology stuff, and it's a lovely way to connect with the community as well, because we could never get together like this all of a sudden on a Friday at 3 o'clock, could we?
Yes.
So,
Shall I?
are you going to open for and talk to us a little bit first?
Yes, great. Let me just try and share my screen. Okay. Oh, sorry. Let me just. So I just need to sort of find. My talk has just disappeared. Give me one moment.
Don't worry. The screen sharing is working, though.
Okay, good.
So I don't know if you guys out there will have seen the exciting news that yesterday the Queen signed the Down Syndrome Bill, and it is now the Down Syndrome Act. So we're very excited about the promise that holds. These guys will be a part of improving the future of people with Down syndrome, but that bill will be helping to implement everything they learn into the guidelines and the care of our loved ones in the future. Okay, I see we're ready to go. Go for it.
Brilliant. So thanks everyone for joining this Facebook Live session. My name is Lee Chan. I work at Queen Mary. And thank you, Liz, for the invitation. So as Liz says, I'm a researcher, but also a pediatric endocrinologist. So what that means is that I look after the hormonal problems in children. So the study that I'm going to talk to you about is called GO-DS21. And this is a European study that is funded by the EU, and it consists of 12 institutions and one patient organization. I've put sort of the various institutions on this map on the right. And in particular, we are recruiting participants from London, Spain, and France. I've put the project website here, our Twitter account, and we also have a YouTube channel with some sort of, informative videos in case anyone is interested to sort of delve into the details in a bit more detail. So this just shows you so some of the members. We've actually expanded beyond this photo of the sort of research team across Europe. And I've highlighted in the red boxes the sort of clinical team. So, those led by Professor Andre Strydom from King's College London, who will be speaking to you a bit later, myself, as well as Sophie Durand from the Institute Jerome Lejeune, and Professor Rafael de la Torre in Spain. We are joined by the European Down Syndrome Association, led by Mr. Pat Clark. So what is this project about? So GO-DS21, in the long sort of wordy description, means gene overdosage and comorbidities during the early lifetime in Down syndrome. So what we sort of are looking at are, we know that conditions such as intellectual disability and obesity appear at a much higher rate in individuals with Down syndrome compared to people without Down syndrome. And this matters as unhealthy weight predisposes to a number of problems, such as breathing problems, dyslipidemia, which means an abnormal amount of lipids in the blood, diabetes, gait problems, cognitive problems, and learning problems. And the aim of GO-DS21 is to work out why and find ways to help. So we're going to look at some genetics. So these are genes on chromosome 21 and how the environment interacts with this to sort of predispose to obesity and intellectual disability. And in particular, my role is to sort of think about and look at some of the hormones that might contribute. So I just want to sort of, give a little bit of understanding about what are hormones and why does it matter? So hormones are your body's chemical messengers. So they're almost like, a postman that delivers one thing from one place to another. So they travel in your bloodstream to sort of different tissues or organs. And there are many different hormones in the body. And some of you may well have heard about the thyroid hormone. So this is, the thyroid hormone comes from this little gland around your neck called the thyroid gland. Some of you may have heard about insulin, which is a hormone that comes from the pancreas, which is another gland just underneath the liver, as well as stress hormone, cortisol. This is a hormone that comes from the adrenal glands, which are these two glands that sit above the kidneys. And hormones in general play a huge role in daily life as it affects many aspects, such as growth and development, puberty, heart rate, metabolism, appetite, mood, stress, and body temperature. And some hormones play a really crucial and important part in healthy weight. So this is not an extensive list, but some of the sort of endocrine and metabolic sort of conditions in Down syndrome I've listed here. So some of you might have heard about hypothyroidism. This is when your body is unable to produce thyroid hormone from this gland, this butterfly-like gland around your neck. Weight issues, diabetes, and sort of issues around growth and puberty. So what we want to find out and how will this help? So we want to improve understanding of some of the health conditions in people with Down syndrome. We want to understand how lifestyle factors, so things like sleep, diet, exercise, as well as medical factors, change the development of conditions associated with Down syndrome. And in the longer term, we hope to be able to prevent, monitor, and treat some of these problems, such as weight, diabetes, and different hormonal conditions. So this was my final slide, which is to say thank you all for your attention. I attended my first World Down Syndrome Day event, which introduced me to odd socks. So I've put a picture of that here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chan. That was really helpful. And I like how you kind of took us back to school and reminded us what hormones do. And I love the postman analogy.
I'm sorry, it's probably too basic for you.
No, it's not. It's not. I frequently, being a medic, we are just so guilty of just jumping straight ahead, and we forget that most people haven't learned about this stuff since back at school. So it's really important. And I frequently use that postman. I'm going to use that postman one, but I use the lock and the key as well.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's a good one. But we will come back to you later with some questions, I'm sure.
Sure.
I've just been jotting down a couple that myths and things. I'd love to hear what your opinion are about hormonal issues in Down syndrome. But we will hand over now to Professor Andre. Hi, Andre. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you, and also very pleased to join you again. So what I thought we could do is to start with a video clip before I tell you a bit more about the project and what it means to take part in it. So the video clip will introduce just a few people working on the project in the various clinical sites. And it will be in different languages. So we'll start in English, but we'll then go into Spanish or Catalan even, and French. I'm not sure the automatic translate has worked very well in some cases, but hopefully it'll at least give you an idea of what the different sites look like and what we might be doing there. So Liz, if you could start the video.
Hi, my name's Jasmine. I'm a research assistant here at King's College London. The study is about the health of people with Down syndrome, so we're particularly looking at how environmental factors, so things like sleep, exercise and diet, as well as different genetic factors, influence the development of people with Down syndrome.
Hi everyone, I'm Mirren. I'm the study coordinator for the GO-DS21 study in London. Here is the typical assessments that we do. We play some games. And if you want to participate, get in touch with us and we will have you on board. Thanks for helping and nice to meet you.
Hola, nosaltres som l'Aida, la Laura i la Maria i som les psicòlogues involucrades al projecte GO-DS21.
Ens trobareu a Barcelona, a l'Institut Hospital del Mar d'Investigacions Mèdiques. La nostra feina en aquest estudi és administrar les proves cognitives a tots els participants.
Hola, nosaltres som les metgesses, som l'Anna i la Patrícia i ens encarreguem de fer les entrevistes mèdiques.
Estem participant a l'estudi GO-DS i ens veureu a nosaltres en les visites, fent-vos entrevistes clíniques, us passarem, prendrem la tensió arterial, també mirarem a veure quin és el vostre perímetre abdominal i tot això ho anirem enregistrant en els quaderns de l'estudi, així que esperem veure-us aviat.
Les personnes porteuses de trisomie 21 sont plus souvent atteintes de pathologies en lien avec des déséquilibres hormonaux ou métaboliques. Le programme de recherche GO-DS21 vise à mieux comprendre le développement de ces pathologies et les différents liens qu'il peut exister entre celles-ci et la trisomie 21. Notre objectif final est de pouvoir mieux comprendre et donc mieux traiter, voire de prévenir l'apparition de ces maladies et ainsi d'améliorer la qualité de vie des personnes porteuses de trisomie 21.
Great, thank you for that. So that's just sort of introducing some of the people working on the study and maybe showing where we will be doing the study and also some of the procedures. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Just get my slides up. And we start from the start. Good. So Dr. Chan has already introduced some of the main ideas behind the study, but just a reminder, so we want to understand or have a better understanding of some health conditions in people with Down syndrome. And we will do that by exploring how lifestyle factors such as sleep, diet, and exercise and medical factors interact and influence the development of these conditions. And in particular, we will be looking at weight, diabetes, and different hormonal conditions. I should say that we're talking about the work that we will be doing with people with Down syndrome, but there are many other labs working as well. They will be using some of the samples and things that we collect and to do scientific explorations to help us with improved understanding. And so what we're looking for are to see people who have Down syndrome, aged 12 to 45 years old, They should be accompanied by parents or caregivers, because we need some information, for example, about people's lifestyles. And so what it means to take part is that here in London, people will have to come and visit us at the Institute of Psychology, Psychiatry and Neuroscience in Denmark Hill in South London. We will be going through some questionnaires with caregivers and parents. And then we might play some games, memory tests with people, with participants with Down syndrome, and then take basic health measurements. So that will include height, weight, blood pressure, and so on, but also measure things like adiposity. So we have special machines that can measure the depth layer of fat in the skin. And we will take some blood samples. We will send those off for basic examination in local laboratories. So we will measure glucose levels, insulin levels, thyroid levels, and we will save some of the blood samples as well for more specialist work, like looking at epigenetics, for example. And we may take a hair sample, and that's because we can measure stress hormones in hair. And so we can measure stress hormones over a number of months at the last centimeter or so of the hair. And then for some people, 1 in 4 people will be invited to come back again for some more in-depth assessment. And that will include sort of an IQ test, more blood tests, and will also be given a Fitbit that they could keep to use for a week at home, so we can measure activity levels and sleep. And people who take part in the second visit will also have to collect spit samples a few times in the day in order to measure stress levels as well during the day, because we know that stress hormones change during the day as the day goes along. So this is what participants will do when they take part. We've already seen a number of people, and I should say that most people enjoy taking part and really like doing some of the assessments and things, although it does take a couple of hours, so you need to be prepared to stay for a couple of hours. But we make sure that people understand what they are going to do by giving them information, talking them through information sheets with pictures, as well as taking consent. So asking people whether they agree to take part. And of course, if somebody can't do that themselves, then we can also ask their parents or caregivers to sign on their behalf. And finally, we make sure that we can reimburse people. So we will reimburse travel expenses. We will provide lunch on the day. If people are traveling from further away, we can provide overnight accommodation to make it easier, in which case we may do the visit 1 and 2 in one go, if possible. And we also want to compensate people for their time. And so each person will get a shopping voucher as well that they can use in a number of shops. So that's just a very brief overview of what we will be, what it would be like to take part in a project. And ultimately, what we want to learn from this research is we hope to have a better understanding of the usual range of blood test values for people with Down syndrome. Because sometimes clinicians tell us that they don't know what a blood test value mean for a person with Down syndrome sometimes. So this will be a great opportunity to improve guidance for doctors. We will hopefully have a better understanding of how lifestyle affects health in people with Down syndrome and how to improve that as well. So with the Fitbit measurements, we will see what the range of activity levels are and how that relates to other health measures, for example. And ultimately, the laboratory scientists are hoping to identify better treatments for example, diabetes in people with Down syndrome by making use of the samples that we will send. So I think just very briefly how to get hold of us or to contact us, and we can also perhaps put this on the Facebook page, but here in London, that's our contact details. So we have a dedicated email address called downsyndrome@kcl.ac.uk. So it's easy to remember. Dedicated phone number. And if there are people watching from abroad, there is some details as well for the team in Spain. So it's Maria Gomez, you can email there. And also in France, there's also some dedicated email address in France. So thank you for listening to us, and we'd be happy to answer some questions.
Awesome, thank you. That's really interesting to hear everything you're hoping to look at, and definitely areas where anyone who's looked after someone with Down syndrome has wondered, is that normal? Is that is that a result that I should be worried about? Or, is this something that a lot of people with Down syndrome might have and I shouldn't be alarmed? So I think you're going to be gathering some really helpful information. So thank you for getting involved with this study. So first question, I think maybe Dr. Chen, Professor Chen, you might want to kind of see what you think about this. So we often get questions where people talk about fullness in people with Down syndrome, and some people may know that's related to certain hormones that trigger and make us feel full. What are your thoughts on, do people with Down syndrome have differences in when they feel full?
I mean, so there's not a lot of sort of data out there actually that sort of can give you a concrete answer with that. But we know that sort of certain hormones can make you feel hungry or full. So in that respect, I would say that there's still sort of quite a lot of work that can be done to really sort of work out the reasons why there is a sort of potential difference in sort of feeling full versus not feeling full, and sort of even with people without Down syndrome, there is a difference. There's also differences in people feeling full and not full. And there's multiple hormones that's been associated with as well. So, I think it's an area that's really interesting, and we'll be checking some of those hormones within our study as well.
That's great, yes, because that issue of, are they resistant to the hormone leptin or not, a bit like people are resistant to insulin when they get diabetic, type 2 diabetic. So whether that's an issue too, because I know so many parents say they feel like their child doesn't have an off switch, that they just seem to be not full, and it's obviously a big worry for them.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be checking sort of some of the gut hormones and some of the like leptin and etc. as well.
So can you remind us which ones? So if people are more sort of interested in the details, so we are measuring leptin, adiponectin.
Yep, and GLP-1.
And GLP-1. So a few other hormones as well. Yeah.
Are you guys looking at the gut microbiome?
Yes. So there's a proteomics arm, metabolomics arm, and there will be microbiome as well. But it's just trying to remember. I think that's measured in the sputum rather than
by stool.
By stool. Yeah.
I don't know if you know, there's a study going on at the moment out of UCL that's looking at a sort of subset around constipation probiotics, and they're taking some samples, and there's a large study, DS Biome, being run out of Ireland as well. So yeah, there's obviously really exciting sort of centers popping up where people are really developing what we call biobanks of data, right? So that's where scientists begin to bank data. So if they decide to look at one, compound A, B, and, C, they can actually come back later. They've frozen that if they want to decide to look at something a little bit deeper. So that's a really exciting thing that scientists do to allow them to come back to what they had studied earlier and look again. Okay, so then the next question is, are you guys going to be sort of investigating if people with Down syndrome lose and gain weight in the same way that that people who don't have Down syndrome? Is that something that you might be able to understand a little bit better?
So do you want me to take this, Lee? So in the study where people come in to see us, we probably won't be able to do that because we won't be able to, won't have enough time to see them again. But hopefully, a great study would be if we could get more funding and then invite people back again after a year or two and see what's happened and see what's changed and how that associates with changes in measurements such as weight, for example. What we do, another arm of the study is actually to use data from one of the big UK primary care data sets called CPRD. And within that, we have identified a large number of people with Down syndrome attending GP surgeries, and which means it's anonymized data, completely anonymized, of course. And it means that we can then compare people with Down syndrome against people from the general population. We can match them by age and gender, and then explore different sort of aspects. And one of the things we did want to look at was to see whether people with Down syndrome respond in the same way to treatments, for example, or interventions for obesity. So do they do as well, or do they struggle when they are sent to a dietitian or for a special weight loss program? So those are one of the, some of the questions that we have. We're not sure we would be able to answer all of those questions with that kind of data, but we're hoping to try and address some of it.
And just to add on to that, with the study, we'll also sort of collect food data through sort of diaries, as well as sort of exercise, sort of physical activity data through the Fitbit.
That'll be really interesting to put it all together, won't it? So when you guys are looking at the memory side of things, or the sort of tests that you're going to be doing, will you be looking at sort of single measurements, or will you be looking if what they're doing is changing things, or?
It's single measurements at this stage. Yeah, so it's one-off measurements.
Okay. But as you said, you're hoping maybe later on down the line.
In future, one might be able to do longitudinal sort of work, yeah.
So this study is looking at children and adults, and one of the things that we've always been interested in is the growth charts that are given to all parents, and the little red book you get with your baby, and they take out the one that's there already and they put in the special Down syndrome growth chart. And what I've always wondered is the research that they based that growth chart on, was in a time where maybe we weren't as clinicians as proactive with treating some of the conditions that affect growth. And I do wonder what a child born in 2022, what their growth might be like. Will you guys be collecting any data that will be able to contribute to sort of improving our knowledge around that?
I mean, I don't think that there'll be enough numbers to sort of really be able to document the sort of normal ranges. But I think you have Liz, I think you have a really good point about sort of, there's always a sort of need in terms of updating growth charts as a sort of overall thing. Andre, I don't know whether you have any other thoughts.
No, other than we've recognized it's an issue. For example, when we started looking at the CPRD data set and had to try and identify people with Down syndrome with obesity, it became really difficult because we couldn't always apply the the thresholds. And in children, for example, in adults you might be able to apply some of the same sort of thresholds, but in children it seemed to be quite difficult, and maybe there is some, you know, one of the questions is what is a normal weight for a person with Down syndrome, right? So ultimately maybe this could help to some extent, you know, using large population level kind of data.
So yeah, so I think with the CPRD data, then, you know, actually that could be a sort of a valuable data set to sort of help with that side of things. And actually, so, you know, the data I think we have, Andre, shows that there is a shift with decades in terms of weight within Down syndrome.
In the way things are getting better or worse, or?
Yeah, so it's a pity we should have brought some of those slides.
I threw this question at you, sorry.
I can sort of, if I have time, I can sort of look at it. But basically what Lee means is that we can see that children with Down syndrome are at risk of obesity at younger age than their peers. So we see a peak in the obesity rates in sort of their teens and early 20s or something, isn't it? But then, interestingly, the general population takes over then. So obesity rates slowly increase in general population, and people with Down syndrome, as they get older, their weight sort of plateaus and start to even drop off a bit. As they get older, we think it may be something to do with aging, maybe not eating or not able to eat as well, and perhaps also in some people it may be an indication of developing Alzheimer's disease or something. But it seems as if you know, things like obesity has a higher risk in younger people with Down syndrome compared to the general population, rather than in midlife or in older adulthood. That's at least what it seems like on that data. Is that right, Lee?
So we know when we look at sort of sleep apnea in the general population, and that's associated with memory problems and Alzheimer's, is being of higher weight, is that also in the general population associated with later development of dementia, Andre?
Well, we don't know, but it's an interesting hypothesis, isn't it? We think that might be possible, isn't it? So that people, if they have, if there's a contribution to sleep apnea through being overweight, it may make cognitive outcomes in the long run worse, isn't it? You know, it seems a logical sort of might be logical that there is a relationship. I'm not sure of a lot of data yet that confirms that, but that's something that people may want to look at and consider and explore in the future.
I think that there is association between apnea and later dementia. If I can find the paper, I'll put it in the chat. And yeah, I mean, I've always felt that if there are individual factors that we can, you know, kind of tackle, then you know, what would be the actual background rate in people with Down syndrome, you know, it may be better than what we're looking at, which is the only room for improvement, right? Okay, so you mentioned as well that you were hoping to sort of understand a little bit more about what is normal and abnormal when we do blood tests. Can you say a little bit more about maybe which blood tests you guys are hoping to understand?
So, for example, we are sending bloods of on everybody taking part in the study for thyroid levels and insulin levels as well, glucose levels, and then a lot of all the other basic sort of markers. So we do blood counts, or basic blood counts, and also some liver function tests. So it might be interesting to see if there's differences in liver function tests, and also basic kidney function tests. So we will have all of that available, I think. And that could be helpful. And there will be 300 or so people who would have data on that between the ages of 12 and 45. So we might be able to see some differences with age as well. And I think that could be helpful in terms of trying to understand. We know already from our clinical work that, and I'm sure you know as well, that if you send a blood sample for a full blood count from a person with Down syndrome is likely to come back with certain sort of what is called abnormal, but is actually normal for a person with Down syndrome, right? So, and the same with blood pressure as well, isn't it? People with Down syndrome often have lower blood pressure values, which is good in a way, but it may, if you didn't know about that, you would think something is amiss, right?
And recently I've noticed elevated uric acid in lots of my patients. They don't maybe all have symptoms of gout, but, you know, I did find one paper that talked about whether uric acid was a protective antioxidant in those particular cases. But it's not understanding if it's the chicken or the egg, right? So it's unpacking what is the biochemistry behind that raised marker, and should we act on it, or should we sort of, you know, go, that's just Down syndrome. It's always unpacking it further and further, isn't it?
Yeah. And I should have made, I think Dr. Chan already mentioned leptin, adiponectin, and so on, that we will also be measuring in those individuals.
So, Dr. Lee, can you talk to us a little bit about like diabetes in people with Down syndrome? Is this something that we see more frequently or less frequently?
Yeah, so you know, there's two types of diabetes. So there's what we say as type 1. So that's the type of diabetes that sort of starts relatively young, and is due to an autoimmune process. So what that means is that, you know, you have the body sort of, you know, generating antibodies attacking that organ, and sort of causing that organ to fail to produce insulin. And in type 1, your treatment is to replace with insulin. And we know that sort of in Down syndrome, there is sort of it's variable in terms of the reports, but anything sort of between sort of 4 times, type 1 is 4 times more common in Down syndrome compared to those without Down syndrome, the general population. So anything between 4 to 8 times have been sort of reported. And then there's type 2 diabetes. So this is where generally sort of, you know, associated with a gaining weight, and you become insulin resistant. And in those individuals who tend to be slightly older, then they require sort of start off with oral treatment and may sort of progress to insulin treatment. And again, sort of through this CPRD data that Andre was talking about, we really did see a sort of increase in diabetes as a whole in Down syndrome compared to the general population.
And presumably you're hoping to understand if it's the same treatment that they would respond to eventually. I guess that'd be a down the line understanding that.
Yeah, and you know, sort of multiple things we'd like to understand about that. So, you know, in terms of onset, in terms of, you know, is it the same mechanisms that sort of cause the sort of diabetes as we would expect within the sort of general population, as well as sort of, you know, looking at sort of, we hope our sort of data will help us sort of look at some of the preventive strategies, as well as implementation within guidelines in terms of at what stage to sort of screen for diabetes, and, you know, more awareness about diabetes as a whole.
Anything to add, Andre, about diabetes? You see a lot of people with Down syndrome in your clinics, don't you?
Yes, no, I think I can't really add much more. So, I mean, I guess to say is that even though rates may be higher in people with Down syndrome, ultimately it's only a small percentage of people that are affected by it, but it's still important, of course. That's a very treatable condition. It's really important to manage it well, to prevent complications and things. So we do want to know when people have diabetes.
Absolutely. We frequently try to educate everyone about this concept of something called diagnostic overshadowing. And unfortunately, it happens to lots of people that have conditions that are lifelong. And it means that when you go to the doctor with symptoms of a new condition, sometimes the doctor or the healthcare professional just thinks it's attributed to that first condition that you might have. So they might say, oh, it's just normal for Down syndrome for someone to be overweight or very sleepy or hair falling out or very dry skin, or symptoms where actually in anyone else they would get sent for a blood test to check up. So always keep in mind that even the nicest clinician, any of us out here, we can be guilty of diagnostic overshadowing, and you know, to always think, what tests would you do if my loved one didn't have Down syndrome? Can always be a really helpful question to ask. So yeah, helpful. Okay, so just kind of in closing, is there any person in our community with Down syndrome who wouldn't qualify to be involved, and how should everyone else get in touch with you guys? Remind us again.
I mean, we would like to see, we would want to talk to anybody who contacts us to check and see if they're able to take part in the study. Most people would be eligible. It is important, though, that the person is able to tolerate simple procedures such as taking blood. So that would be one consideration. And then the other thing to mention is that we would like to see people up to the age of 45. And that is because we're interested in what happens in early life and teenage years and during early adult life in this instance. And people over the age of 45 would not be able to take part in this study. So in terms of contacting us, you could contact us at downsyndrome@kcl.ac.uk. That's easy email, downsyndrome@kcl.ac.uk.
Great, and I put that in the chat along with your phone number, your dedicated line that you've got.
Great, thank you.
So thank you both for joining us. I really appreciate it. I think everyone is going to enjoy hearing about what you're looking at, and also waiting to hear what the results show. And so thank you so much for both of you caring about our community and working on improving their health as well. We appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.